Hi, Renee.
Hey, Marvina, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am well, thank you.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah,
I the weather is like I thought we were gonna have spring and then not.
yeah.
So hopefully
I
it's coming in here soon.
I was sitting on my couch this afternoon and a thunderstorm rolled through. It was like, oh
Okay.
my goodness. And here we are just a few days ahead of Easter. It was just like really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always like that, right? I always have to remember that April showers brings wait, April
Mayflowers. Yeah.
Mayflowers, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the weather has been, but hey, through it all, thankful. We haven't had too bad of a winter, so that's great. But
Yeah. Yeah. It's been good. So
yeah,
yeah.
it has been, it has been. So we're gonna get into it today.
Let's
Me,
go.
our conversation. So today, we're on episode 33. Yay! And
Yay.
the title of our conversation today is Grace for Days.
Mm.
And we're just gonna talk a little bit about extending grace to others, extending grace to ourselves, just extending grace. So I'm gonna start out with a scripture, Ephesians 4:32, which says, "Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another as forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave you." And just so I've been thinking a lot about extending grace to others. Me personally, I think that especially when we're dealing with relationships, right, with other people, whether it be family, friends, sometimes we can get in this place. I'm going to say sometimes I can get in this place where, because it's a delicate balance sometimes with
Hmm.
some people,
Hmm.
as far as you have to set boundaries, but at the same time, sometimes I can be too harsh. That's how I feel sometimes, just in maybe I don't agree with how a person is moving, or um something that they may have done, or something like that. And so sometimes I think in the name of setting boundaries, we forget that we also have to extend grace to others.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and that could be difficult sometimes, because I think that, sometimes we feel we have a right to feel a certain type of way. Um,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts?
Well, I know this topic has been on your heart for quite some time
Mm-hmm.
because I know in previous episodes, probably going back 3, 4 episodes, I know that we've come across this topic about others, and
Mm-hmm.
you've kind of expressed that God's really put that on your heart. And I
Mm-hmm.
think I think it's important right now, especially because like we've said before, this world is kind of turned upside down, and it's like if we're the shining light,
Mm-hmm.
um, we have a responsibility, you know.
Right.
And I looked up grace and I looked up mercy because I was thinking, okay, what is God's grace? Uh, Grace is God giving us what we do not deserve, His
Mm-hmm.
favor. So if
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times I think we think that we're giving it out of ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
but it should be God giving grace through us,
Right.
right? So you're right. If we're trying to do it on our own, it can
Mm-hmm.
get it can get very tiresome and
Mm-hmm.
weigh a whole lot on your shoulders. You know what I mean? But if we think of it in terms of God's grace, how God, he's giving us what we do not deserve, his favor. I think it's easier to see that, you know, okay, here's what we need to be doing. They may not deserve it. Like you say, their actions, their decisions in our minds, they may not deserve it, but
Right.
that's what grace does.
Yes.
That grace gives favor to those people. And then mercy, because I was kind of going, what is the difference between grace and mercy? Mercy is God not giving us what we deserve, which is death, right? So God giving us what we don't deserve, it doesn't mean that we don't deserve good things. It just means we're a fallen people. We're separate from him. And so for him to give us favor is an amazing gift from him. Yeah. Yeah.
I like what you said about when you were saying what grace was, and you were expounding on, you know, sometimes we feel we don't want, it's difficult for us to give other people grace. It's difficult for us, and I can't remember exactly how you said it, but we feel that they don't deserve it, right? So maybe, and isn't that funny how we can always look at what other people don't deserve,
Yeah.
but do we look at our relationship with Christ and what we don't deserve? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
So it's like this thin line that is crossed sometimes. And what I'm really learning and what God has been dealing with me about is you can still set boundaries, you can still hold people accountable, you can still forgive people, and through extending grace you still love them, you let them off the hook for whatever that thing was. That does not mean that you put yourself back in harm's way. You know what I'm saying? I think that sometimes we think it's an either or. Right.
Right. Right.
And then sometimes it's just hard for us to let things go, and we don't even realize that we hold on to them. I call it going down a rabbit hole. And so, you know, you're like, it starts here, and then before you know it, you're so upset because, like, they did this and they did this, and then I can't believe that they did this, and I tried to give them you know, and it's just this rabbit hole that you go down.
Yeah.
And I also believe that's one of, you know, the trick of the enemy to keep us in that state, because then you're upset that it robs your joy because you keep just mulling over this thing, whatever it may be. And so, and you're not able to have the joy of the Lord because you're so focused on this other thing and it's taking precedence in your life. I looked up Ephesians 4:2, and this is the New Living Translation.
Okay.
And so what it says is, always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowances for each other's faults because of your love. And I really liked that translation because, again, it's easy for us to see fault, see the fault in others, but we have faults too. And because, you know, the word tells us to forgive as you know, we want to be forgiven, and love your neighbor as as yourself. We really have to think about how many times God has extended grace to us when we didn't deserve it, you know, when we didn't, you know, things we did we knew we shouldn't have done, because we're human and it happens.
Right.
But I think that in society today, we're taught that, you know, we have to protect ourselves, we have to protect our space. And our protection comes from Christ. Of course, Christ will direct us to, set certain boundaries for our space, but I think that sometimes we just cross over into that um defensive wall that we put up. Um,
Mhm.
and when we're not extending grace to others, there's this air that comes with it, and it kind of blocks, it blocks
Right.
you from, being able to have interchanges with other people. Um,
Mhm.
and it could be difficult, especially when, it might be someone you love, or, someone you work with that you got to see every day. And it's hard to just walk away sometimes. Um,
Mhm.
so just
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. I think yeah, it's interesting because I find myself sometimes, and this is not grace that I'm going to be sharing. Um, there are people that you think have to earn
hmm
your kindness or your kind words or your forgiveness or
hmm
um, uh, so I find myself a lot of times somebody will be talking about a person maybe that I know, and they said they did this, and my first response is, well, they're so stupid, you know. That's a Jesus response for you.
Right,
That's the first thing that you think is, oh, well, they're
right,
stupid. And it's like, if
right.
God's giving grace, God's looking at it, and goes, no, they're lost,
Mhm.
you know,
Exactly.
right. Or they're deceived, or they're whatever, they're broken, whatever the case may be. But my first thought is, well, they're stupid. And
Right.
it's like, okay, how can you give grace
Mhm.
when that is your first thought about them? You know
Right.
what I mean? You're
Right.
not going to have those kind of gentle words because you think they're
Right.
stupid.
Right.
And, and it's like, and like you said, it's only by the grace of God that I'm not in that same situation,
That's right.
you
That's
know?
right.
And so, yeah, that's something that I've been challenged with. But at the
Mhm.
same time, I think,
Me too.
what's that?
Me too.
Oh, okay. I thought you said I knew. I knew that about you, Renee.
No, I said me too.
Me too. Yeah, so it's and what you're saying too is we can show grace
Mhm.
because we're showing God's kindness, God's favor toward that person,
Mhm.
but we can have boundaries. And I've been thinking about this too. Um it- just like if somebody, like if you've got a negative person coming into you all the time, it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that you have to sit down with them and hear this negativity.
Mhm.
You don't have to open that door.
Right.
You don't have to open the door. You can almost shift the conversation prior to the negativity.
Right.
And then I also been thinking there are people in your life that are maybe very close to you
Mhm.
that are doing things that make it hard
Mhm.
to show grace, right?
Mhm.
But have I ever taken the opportunity to stop and say, okay, I need to talk to you about something?
Mhm.
I
Right.
have somebody in my family very negative, and
Mhm.
I've finally come to the point where I will share that, because if
Mhm.
you have compassion but you don't use wisdom,
Mhm.
you know, you're kind of defeating the purpose. So
Right.
I've been thinking, okay, if I know this about someone in my life,
Mhm.
that it's a destructive thing, or what is my grace toward them? I
Mhm.
should be speaking truth.
Right.
I should be I should be saying, okay, I'm going to be honest with you here. This
Mhm.
may be a reason why people pull away from you, or,
Right.
so that's kind of what I've been challenged with lately.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
I think that extending grace allows us to be able to hold others accountable, but with love.
Mhm,
Because
mhm,
just like, what you were saying, sometimes it could be people that are difficult to get along with. They're difficult to get along with. And because
mhm,
of that reason, a lot of people will just shy away from them,
mhm,
instead of actually speaking to what the reason is for them pulling away, right? And when I say, let me kind of make a better example. When I say there could be people that could be difficult to get along with, maybe, we all have people in our lives that we would label as difficult.
mhm.
I don't know, maybe somebody labels me as difficult. Heck, but but that we label as difficult. And it could be because, they could be selfish. They could be um um kind of, a person that takes advantage, or they could be very negative. But because no one ever says anything to them about that behavior, that becomes their normal behavior, right?
Mhm,
And then they
mhm.
they learn how to people learn how to use that but behavior to manipulate, right? But I think that, so there has to be accountability, but in order for that accountability to translate correctly, you have to be able to approach it in love. You have to extend grace to that person, so that
Mhm.
you don't come from a place of being judgmental,
Right,
you know
right.
and I think that's what I'm learning.
Mhm,
You can still hold people accountable,
mhm.
but I have to make sure my heart is in the right place, so that it comes out right.
Right.
And so that, because the most important thing is for them to receive it, right? Because if I'm just saying it, if I'm trying to hold somebody accountable and they're not getting it, what's the point?
Yeah,
But um I think that we've gotten to the place a lot. Well, I think it's just part of humanity and part of who we are. Um, Not new, but people, we don't want to confront things a lot of times. And
yeah,
so people have been given the ability to just kind of move the way they do. Everybody else around them is mad about it, but no one has ever said anything, right? And
right,
then you get so upset about it and so tired of it, and then you end up going off, and then that starts this whole other problem, right?
right,
The
right.
other thing that God has really been pressing on my heart is, because we are the light of the world, we are Christians, God uses us in other people's lives. And if we're not, we should be being a light. That doesn't mean that you have to be a doormat. It doesn't
Right.
mean that again, you don't go, to holding people accountable. You can clearly tell that accountability is big on my list, right?
Yeah.
I've said it like a bunch, but that's the thing. Accountability is one of my, it's, to me, accountability is up there with integrity.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
God has really been dealing with me on how to, I guess, package it, maybe. I don't know if that's
yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes, I like things. Just tell me what you got to say. I don't go all around the mulberry bush. Just don't stop
Yeah.
talking it up. Just tell me what it is, so we can hash it out. We can talk about it, get past it. But
Right,
everybody cannot receive that. And
right.
that, you know what I'm saying? And so, not that you change what you say, but sometimes we just need to be um sensitive to the spirit, and then we also need to be sure that we are extending grace and not coming from a judgmental place. Now, there are times when people they're not going to want to hear what you say. They're not going to want to be held
Right,
accountable. They're going to automatically label you judgmental.
right.
That's just going to happen. But there are times when I know there's times when I say to myself, a little judgy, Marvina. And so I have to check myself and say, okay, was I extending grace to that person? Did I already have something in my heart
Yeah,
that wasn't grace,
yeah,
when approaching that person?
yeah.
And um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think approach is important because, especially like with young kids, we
Hmm.
expect them to make the best decisions in the world where we as adults a lot of times make stupid decisions, but we have that expectation,
Right,
and so a lot of times approaching a kid maybe who is doing something, going down making decisions, going down a path that our first comment to them, we have to qualify it, right? I knew you'd screw it up.
right,
you know, but I'm gonna show you some grace, It's like,
right,
no, it doesn't it doesn't work that way.
right,
You really if we're coming if showing grace to others is using kind and gentle words, that's not gonna do it,
right,
you know? That's when you sit down with them and you say, "Okay, this has been on my heart.
right,
And there's something that's kind of that I want to talk to you about and make it a safe space. And like you
right,
say, a lot of people aren't going to accept it no matter how safe you make it.
right,
They're
right,
not going to accept it. But we can't go into it with first let me tell you how you screwed up
right,
and then we're going to, I'm going to show you grace and I'm going to show you kind words. Sometimes they just
right,
kind of cancel each other out,
right,
you know.
right. And I'm so glad
So
you brought that up about even dealing with kids and even generations that are younger than us, because a lot of times we forget. We are now, things that the wisdom that we've been able to obtain over the years, hopefully.
yeah,
Nope, I'm going to skip over that, hopefully. Um,
yeah.
we forget it. We had to have certain life experiences to get to a certain place where you had wisdom, right? Because we had to learn certain lessons. So, a lot of times when it comes to parenting, when it comes to mentoring young people, um, I think a lot of times we come off very judgmental and we forget that we were once there. Some of us are
Yeah.
still there, but I know I didn't have to say that, but I know.
But for those of you who felt convicted by that, uh,
But we're looking, our lenses have changed.
yeah,
So we see things in a different light. Even growing in the word, and even when you have um younger Christians, maybe they're younger in their walk. Maybe, age-wise, we're the same age, or they may be older, but spiritually, in their spiritual walk, they may not be where you are. But that is another reason why it's important for us to extend grace, because we didn't just wake up and not that we're perfect, or we don't have a bunch of work to still do, because we do, but we didn't just wake up where we are today. And I
right.
think a lot of times we forget that. And I remember being younger, and, the older generation, whether it was at church or whatever, some of the things that were said sometimes, and I'm like, you, and not that to say that gives me a free ticket, but the brain has only developed to a certain
Yeah,
a certain capacity. And then also they just haven't had the same life experiences. And I do
Right.
believe that that's where it takes for us to continue to pray for them. Sometimes when we see things, it's not necessarily for us to say. Sometimes
Right.
it's for us to pray about that
Right.
thing, God has shown us because we have a certain level of wisdom, and our lenses are different. And so
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because quite often we look at the generations under us as if, you know I can't believe they're doing that. You did it, you don't remember.
Yeah. Well, and the sad thing is you and I grew up, I was in the late 50s, you were probably 60s when you were growing up, right? Maybe early 70s. And those were different days than today,
Exactly. Totally.
so people that had to show us grace might have
Mhm.
been for just very minor decisions or
I don't think
directions.
they were minor. To us, they're minor, but I don't think
Yeah.
they're.
Yeah. Compared to today, though, with all of the kids don't even know which way is up, which way is down, what's right, what's wrong. We have this spirit, even within the Christian community,
Mhm,
that, well, times are changing.
mhm,
So wouldn't God change with the times and it's like, no. So we need to have even more grace for these young people that are coming up in these thought processes that things are okay because that's how the world's going and how it's
mhm,
changing, and we need to, it's like, so it to me, it's become even more necessary to speak in grace, because you're trying to fight a battle that they've got this in their mind. Well, everybody's doing it, everybody says it's okay,
mhm, mhm,
and it's like, but that's not what God said. So you have to come in with truth, but
mhm.
it's not, you can't be shaking the old lady finger and go, shame on you. It has to
Right,
be, there has to be truth, but it has to
right.
be brought to them in a way that, how can I say this? Deception is so heavy right now.
Mhm, mhm.
You got to get the truth in there somehow. And if you're banging against the door of deception, it's not going to work. You can get truth in
Exactly,
there that's going to dispel that darkness.
exactly. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. So I looked up, so I was just thinking of, some ways, how can we extend grace, or um how do we extend grace? Um, so a few ways is through showing forgiveness. Maybe someone has wronged you. You can't go back and undo it. It's been done at this
Right.
point. You can't continue to keep revisiting that thing, because all it does, it makes you mad all over again. And if that is happening, then you need to take that to God and ask God to remove that, because you haven't healed from the, from whatever it is. But that's one of the ways we can, extend grace, is by showing forgiveness, showing
Hmm.
empathy for,
Hmm.
other people, putting yourself in their shoes, seeing things from their perspective, being even open enough. I think that sometimes we're not even open enough to hear a different perspective. I think that's what happens in this. And again, and we've said it a couple of times on our podcast, as we're going into this election season. Um, uh, how things may get a little, um, what's the word? A little rough, I'll say that.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
a lot of that comes from not being open enough to hear somebody else's perspective. It doesn't mean you have to agree with the person.
Hmm.
You're gonna still think what you think. But
Hmm.
I think, sometimes we just go, we go too far because you don't think the way I think, or you don't see things the way I see them. I'm
Right.
now labeling you a bad person, or, it's that judgmental thing that
Right.
comes, you know. Another way is showing compassion for others, showing generosity. And this one is for me, patience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, showing patience. And that shows up different sometimes depending on the type of day I'm having. Some people can just come into my world and I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. That's not showing patience. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you're
Yeah.
already, and sometimes people can feel that, you know, you feel like this person is bugging you, and they can feel that they're bugging. Hey,
You again. Yeah.
yes. And so that's something that God has been dealing with me about too, because I've been really busy these last few months, but that still does not take away from, that's not the other person's fault. You know what I'm saying? That's stuff you have going on with you. And you still need to be patient with people. And that comes sometimes just in our answers to things. And, I've had to apologize to my Arlesia, a few times because I'm just, Arlesia, those who know Arlesia know she loves to talk, as does her mom, right? I heard you, I heard you, Renee. But sometimes I'm a little snappy, and that's not okay, and the Holy Spirit has really been convicting me of that. But that's another way of extending the grace, humility, which means to refrain from judgment and or righteousness. And then reconciliation, making efforts to restore relationships. I think that with everything that is so upside down in the world, I really believe that there is an attack on families, and there has been for a long time. But the family is like the nucleus of humanity, or the nucleus of community, right? It starts your little village, and then it goes from there. And I think that sometimes we forget it's easier to extend grace to those that don't know us so well versus extending grace to those that really know us, or those that we really know.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know um and that's where we have to say, okay, God, if God feels that somebody else should have another chance, who are you to say that they should not?
Exactly.
you know
Yeah. Yeah.
so and then boundaries, we can set healthy boundaries while still extending grace to others. Grace does not mean tolerating abuse or mistreatment.
Right.
Um, some of the benefits of extending grace is it builds relationships, promotes healing and reconciliation. Um, it can help pave the way to healing old wounds. And um, because sometimes when those old wounds, they never heal. And so a lot comes from that. But I think by extending, sometimes we just have to extend grace to those that we feel that have done us wrong. I think back to when, like, you I think it was your book that you wrote with, it was Michelle,
With Michelle.
and the relationship with her mother,
Yeah.
right? And the amount of grace that she extended to her
Right.
mom, you know,
Right.
and sometimes people are just in a space where they make really, really horrible decisions, or they I don't know, I don't know why they do the things they do, but they do. But we can't keep going back to that place, because
Right.
I know that there's been things that I've done in my past that I would never do again. If I had the same thought process then that I have now, it wouldn't have happened. But so I thought that was really something that stuck out to me. And then extending grace will help assist in personal growth. It helps with it assists with cultivating humility, empathy, um, and emotional maturity.
Mhm.
So that there are a lot of benefits, and then it can also help break the cycle of hurt,
Right.
because sometimes there's many of us that have truly experienced a lot of hurt in our
Mhm.
lives, which have hardened us a little bit, hardened our hearts a little bit because of the things that we've been through.
Right.
But the fact that God has brought you through that thing, and I really believe that a lot of times when God brings us through things, we need to reach back and help to bring others through things.
Mhm. Mhm.
I know there's a lot of situations I've had in my life where I wish I had someone that I could go to that wasn't going to judge me, but I need help trying to figure this thing out. I want to
Right.
do it the way I believe that God is saying I should do it. But this is the issue I got now, or this is, because the flesh has come in. And so I have this issue. And so trying to make that transition. And so by
Mhm.
you being a person that extends grace, people will come to you and they will want to um open up to you so that you can help to lead them to where God is trying to take them. Um,
Right.
so um and then I'll fi- I'll finish up with this. Extending grace involves a mindset of love, understanding, and forgiveness. Um, and I thought that kind of really hit me. Um, nope, I don't want to leave with that. I have one more thing I
Okay.
forgot. um, Luke, I wanted to read Luke 6:37, and this is in the New Living Translation uh, version as well. It says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn others, or it will come back against you.
Mhm.
Forgive others, and you will be forgiven." And so,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I think one of the most striking examples of grace that
mhm,
Jesus demonstrated,
mhm,
it was in John 8:1-11. And this is when the woman was caught in adultery. And the
yeah,
Pharisees brought her to Jesus where he had been teaching, basically threw her into right in front of him in the middle of this crowd that he's speaking to,
right,
probably drug her out with maybe just a blanket around her,
yep,
right? Threw her there. And they say, hey, what do you think should be done with this woman? By
mm,
Moses' law, she should be stoned. What do you think? And of
mm,
course, we know they were trying to trap him.
right,
Um, and let's look at this woman for a minute. I don't think I don't think she was like an evil woman. She
mhm,
was a broken woman for some reason to put herself in that spot.
right,
She was broken. There was
mhm,
something lacking in her that
right,
that brought her to this decision. So if you remember the story, Jesus, bends down and writes in the dust. He writes something. We don't know what that is. It could have been these people are so stupid. You know, you don't know what he wrote.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that was in my translation. I don't know. But he writes something and then he stands up and he says, you know, and they say again, you know, what are you going to do? What should we do? And he says, well, the person without sin, let him cast that first stone.
Right.
Then he bent down again
Mhm.
and he's writing, and maybe this time he wrote grace. We
Mhm.
don't know.
Mhm.
But everybody starts to leave, right? The older people first start to walk away. Then
Mhm.
he stands up and he sees that they've disappeared, these accusers, and he says, where are your accusers? And she says, I don't know. And he goes, well, I don't accuse you either, so go and sin no more.
Mhm.
I found it was interesting because Jesus saw beyond her circumstance and her decisions. He could have just reamed her in front of everybody. Well, yeah, you shouldn't be doing this. What are you thinking? Everybody knows this is, you know, he could have reamed her, but he saw beyond her circumstance. He saw beyond her decisions and realized there was a heart that needed to be touched.
Right.
Then he had God's eyes for her.
Mhm.
He knew that
Mhm.
there was something more,
Mhm.
that whether this deception she was under or this oppression, whatever it happened to be, he knew God had more for her. So
Right.
he was seeing God's favor for her. And
Mhm.
then it was interesting, he spoke to her future,
Mhm.
go and sin no more. And I think we have that opportunity when we show grace to
Right.
not just to see beyond their decisions,
Yep. Yep.
speak to them
Yep.
as God would speak. You're broken, you're
Mhm.
hurting, but
Mhm.
you know what? God has something for you. God can restore. God can. So you're speaking to their
Right.
need and to their future. So I
Right.
thought that was a very interesting example that Jesus had of just perfect grace
Mhm. And
for
it's
this woman.
interesting, that you say, she was broken, which she was, which is why most people make a lot of the decisions that they make, you know,
Right,
bad decisions that they are trying to recover from. It's
right.
because they were in a place of brokenness, and
Hmm.
hopefully, they're trying to come out of that space. And so you're right.
Right,
Right.
right. And we don't want to be the people who, um, if they are trying to step out of that, we
Right.
don't want to be people because of the way we approach
Right.
things without that grace
Right.
that causes them to go,
Right. With the stone. Right.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
ready.
yeah, exactly,
Right.
exactly. And
Right.
they might turn and say, well, I can't change. I can't be any different. And so
Right.
they missed their opportunity, yeah, to be healed and restored.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah.
Great example. Yeah. I
Yeah. And then there's one more that I thought was interesting, Mark 6, 1-7. And this
Okay.
is, since we're coming into Easter, this is about when the women came back to the tomb after Jesus had been buried and he was gone.
Mhm.
And there was an angel sitting there, and the women are, panicked. Where is he?
Mhm.
And the angel says, go tell the disciples,
Mhm.
including Peter, that Jesus is going ahead of you to Galilee.
Mhm.
And I thought it was interesting because Peter had betrayed him,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
the grace that was shown, because he could have said, just go tell the disciples, but he said, including Peter, the
Mhm.
person who probably is under the most guilt and shame that there could ever be,
Yeah.
including Peter. And I don't think the angel made that up. I think Jesus on his way out of the tomb goes, okay, now here's what I want you to do. When
Mhm.
these ladies come, I want you to tell them, to tell my disciples, including Peter. I think those words came from Jesus
Mhm. Mhm.
for the angel to tell them. So I thought that was another clear um, uh, expression of grace, is
Mhm.
that in your shame, in your guilt, in your lowest point,
Mm-hmm.
You can find God's grace,
Yeah.
and that grace many times
Yeah.
what am I trying to say? Is shown through us.
Mm-hmm.
It is displayed through us. That's the
Yeah,
only way people are going to see God.
that's
We're
true.
the light, we're the expression of God's love here on earth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And if, and if you can't extend grace to me, who can?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, I agree. And I like that example as well, because Jesus knew before it happened, he already knew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He already knew how it was going to play out. Yet he
Yeah.
still, you know,
Yeah.
after it played out exactly like he said it was going to play out,
Yeah.
he still extended that grace. And when you were using that example, so I always one of my biggest pet peeves, you could tell it's coming. How I see the smile. She's like, oh no, here she goes again. But one of my pet peeves is when people just play in my face. And for those that don't know what that means like you know what you're doing. That's what I think. You know what you're doing, and you're going to insult my intelligence
Yeah.
by making me think that it's something else, right?
Yeah.
But even in that example, things happen just the way Jesus said it was going to happen with Peter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yet
Mm-hmm.
and still, God still said, tell Peter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I like the example.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to
Just
remember that when people are playing in my face, I am.
yeah.
But
Yeah, see beyond their circumstance and their decision. Yeah, yeah.
right.
Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else, Renee?
Well, I just have one thing, and I think it goes along with this grace, and it was in Grace for Days. I like the title that you came up with, Grace for Days. I like that. We had talked in probably episode 3. It
Mhm,
was thankful and grateful, I think.
mhm,
My brother-in-law's sister, who had been had ALS
mhm,
for
mhm.
24 years,
Okay.
we lost her this week. She passed away.
Mm,
But her faith in the Lord was very, very strong. And, a lot of people will ask why. Why did she have that? And we'll never know why. Our bodies betray us. We don't know why.
right.
But I do know that God's grace was with her
Yes.
all through.
Yeah.
His favor was with her all through that experience. And he never left her.
Right.
He never forsook her.
Yes.
And I think if you remember, when I read what she had wrote, so that I
Mhm.
could read her testimony, so to speak, she had ended it by saying, I would have rather had ALS and known God than
Mhm.
had never had ALS and never known God. To
Mhm.
me, that speaks volumes to that grace that God extends to us.
Yeah.
She knew he was by her side.
Right.
Was the circumstance ideal?
Mhm.
Absolutely not. But she knew that he was right by her side. So that's the kind of grace that God shows us. He shows us his favor in every aspect of life.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying, as far as if we're the light of the world, we
Mhm.
need to show that grace to others
Right.
so that they will come to the knowledge of him.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. My condolences to you and the family.
Thank you.
Over the years, the stories that you have shared with me um, about Lois has been very encouraging, and that speaks volumes. When the way you live life is able to encourage others, people you don't even know.
Yeah.
That's why it's important for us to live on purpose, to live with
Mhm.
purpose, and to live um, in God's purpose,
Right.
because you will touch lives that you don't even know you're touching.
Right.
And like I said, the encouragement, many times that just through stories that you shared with me about Lois, and when I was having a hard time and we would talk, and family stuff and all this stuff, and then we would talk and you would share, conversation, maybe conversation you had with Lois, or and then it would bring me back to, really, girl, if
Mm.
somebody can still live with ALS and still have joy, still find joy,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they know that in spite of everything else, God has their back. It it
Yeah.
it it just speaks volumes. So I want to say thank you for sharing those stories and for sharing her with me. I feel as if I know her, because just through the story. So
Yeah.
my prayers will be with both you and the family as well, and her family as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Appreciate that. And I told my nephews the other day, I said, can you imagine her joy when she walked through
Yes,
the gates,
yeah, yeah,
walked into heaven? So
right,
yeah.
right.
So God's grace was definitely upon her, and um, is definitely upon us, and
Yeah,
is our responsibility to share.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Well, until next time.
Until next time.
All
All
right.
right. You take care. Bye.